Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Big Brother 25 during week 8. Now I know that this is a day earlier than usual where you'll be seeing this on Tuesday. I'm recording this on Monday, September 25th. However, I'm going to be pretty busy tomorrow, sort of a one-time thing. And plus, given the state of the house, there just isn't that much to talk about, though there actually has been a shift in the rankings. And I guess I can talk a bit about this twist that has taken over the house over the past week, and to put it simply, it sucks. Now I know that they needed an extra week to fill out on the schedule and they needed to buy time, but I feel like this was such a bad way of doing it. You could have done a number of things here. You could have canceled a double. You could have had like a different style of buyback. You could have even canceled the week 1 eviction and further make a statement after you had literally expelled someone for using the N-word, and yet you allowed a black woman to be voted out just to make room for this? I mean, as it is, you've literally stopped the game. These players are not playing Big Brother right now. We are literally just seeing a bunch of people hanging out in a house and having interpersonal drama. I mean, there's no HOH, there's no veto, there's no votes, there's no meaningful strategy happening right now. It's literally just Jared and Cameron sitting in a house waiting for Thursday night just to have this comp. I mean, literally from the first comp that they had on Friday until the second comp the following Thursday, there is no game going on right now. And I feel like they could have made this a little bit better by having it an actual vote, where at least then the players could have campaigned to potentially vote to send one person back in. But instead, you literally made this a wasted week. I mean, I couldn't think of a worse way you could have handled a situation in a spot where you need to buy time for the show. So I feel like I've made my stance pretty clear. This is such a bad twist. And the fact that it's going to benefit two of the less likable people in the game is not great either, but that's just how it turned out. But anyway, that's just where we are at this point. With that out of the way, there are 11 players to talk about, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 11, the person that is the least likely to stay in the house come Thursday night is Jared. And this should be pretty obvious, where we obviously saw Jared become the second boot during the double, where Corey won HOH. Matt then won the veto after Jared picked him through house guest choice, thinking that Matt was still on his side, which obviously he wasn't. Matt didn't use the veto, and Jared was voted out near unanimously, only getting Siri's vote to stay. And then following this twist coming into play, he then lost the initial comp, meaning that he has no control over his destiny. Where yes, Cam could theoretically choose to make him compete in the comp, but we obviously know that both him and Cam would have chosen to compete in the comp had they won. Cam wanted. And at this point, Jared's only hope of staying in the game is Cam losing the comp, which, given his track record, doesn't seem particularly likely, though you never know. And even outside of that, I feel like even if Jared were to somehow stay in the game, he's probably the least likely to gain any traction, where he's not really being included in many alliances for the time being. And I feel like there's such a high likelihood that if he stays in the game, that he'll just be voted out again the following round unless he wins HOH. Whereas I feel like Cam has a bit more leg room. He has been more involved in building alliances in the days since, though obviously we'll have to see how that pans out. But I feel like Jared is obviously the one that has the least control over his destiny at this point, and given Cam's track record and comps, I feel like it's very likely he will come back in and Jared will be sent out. So I feel like for all those reasons, I can't really have Jared any higher here. He's here at number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and I feel like this person is technically safer than some of the people we'll be talking about soon, but I feel like their win equity has just continued to slide. But here we have Blue, and obviously I feel like Blue played the double eviction pretty poorly, where Corey literally went up to her after he won HOH and asked her if she would use the veto on Jared if she wanted, to which he told him yes. And then Corey responded by saying that he would put her on the block, to where she tried to backpedal saying that she wouldn't, but obviously that's pretty sloppy play there. She ends up getting put on the block next to Jared, meaning that even if she wanted, she would have been forced to use it on herself. She obviously loses Jared here, which I will say on its own, like losing Jared's probably not the worst thing for her, as it probably would allow her to potentially build some inroads with some people. But I feel like with Jared still in the game, it's caused her to be left out of a lot of the strategizing post the double eviction, where people are worried that if Jared comes back into the game, that she would just come back towards them. So because of that, they've been leaving her out of conversations, which isn't great there. I feel like even moving forward, I feel like Blue is someone that has continued to show that she just doesn't have that much respect within the game. And while she's not going to be an immediate target per se, I feel like she hasn't really done herself any favors in terms of building win equity. So I feel like for that reason, even though she's technically safer than some other people, I feel like 10 is a good spot for her. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we actually have the other person that got voted out of the game, but here we have Cameron. And again, I still stand by what I said earlier. I feel like Cameron realistically has no path to the end, even if he gets back in the game, which to be fair is a bit more likely than Jared, given that he won the initial comp. And I would believe that he should be able to win the puzzle challenge on Thursday night and get back into the game. But the reason I don't have him like next to Jarrett on the power ranking is that we did see him be included on some plans where we saw him building this alliance with the likes of Jack and Matt, sort of seeing like these competitors coming together to take out Corey and America, break them up. And there has been some talk about Cam being included in certain plans. Now, obviously, we are still pretty far removed from this actually having any consequences, given, well, there's no game happening right now. But I feel like the fact that Cam has at least been trying to build some inroads is more than I can say than the likes of Jared or even Blue in this case. But I still feel like at the end of the day, he's still someone that no one really wants to take towards the end. And I feel like even if he's able to take some shots along the way, he won't be able to actually get towards the end. Then also, like, I think his initial plan of targeting Felicia first because he thinks she'll be the most bitter juror is a bit misguided as well. So I feel like at the end of the day, Cam's still not in a great spot. I feel like he has a bit more potential than the people we already talked about, which is why he's here number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and I wasn't fully sure what to make of this person, although this person does seem to be in a bit of danger coming the next week. But here we have Felicia. And the main reason I have Felicia this low is that we know that Cameron wants to target her next week if he wins HOH, where he sees her as the most bitter, likely be a bitter juror, so he wants to take her out pre-jury in order to ensure that she won't prevent him from winning. And obviously that's pretty bad, but outside of that, I feel like, again, she's mainly working with Mimi at this point, and while they are a pretty clear duo and they are trying to build this alliance with the likes of Corey and America, and even Corey's talked about Jag and Matt potentially coming to them with a alliance as well, I just feel like Felicia is in a pretty poor spot at this point to actually win the game, considering that obviously she might be outclassed in some of these endgame comps. So I feel like it's for that reason that I don't really feel comfortable putting Felicia too much higher than here, though again, we'll see what happens in the coming week. But for now, I did decide to put her here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and the reason I dropped this person from last week is they are a pretty likely target coming out of this whole double, but we actually have the outgoing HOH, and here we have Corey. And I feel like Corey's in a pretty rough spot at this point, where we have seen Jag and Matt starting to realize that they should be turning their attention towards Corey and America next. That alliance that had come together to take out Izzy has mostly broken up at this point, and it's gotten to the point where even Jag and Matt are probably more likely to work with the likes of Cameron at this point if he comes back into the game. Cameron himself also wants to take a shot at Corey and America relatively soon to break them up, with Corey as the main target there. And I feel like Corey himself has not done himself much favors either, where he has tried to convince America that, you know, like they should be worried about Cameron. And obviously that's all pretty bad. And even the fact that they lost Cameron to begin with when Cameron seemed more likely to work with them at the time of the double eviction is pretty bad there. But I also have to knock him for his conversation with America, Jag, and Matt today, where for whatever reason, he decides to reveal his Final Four alliance with Felicia and Mimi. He even tells Jag and Matt that they should also approach Felicia and Mimi with a Final Four deal, which is pretty insane there. And even worse is that he's even telling them that they should be studying for mental comps, which is also pretty bad considering that Corey would need to win some of those mental comps in the endgame in order to have any sort of security. And I feel like by giving Jag and Matt like tips on how to study for that, it's just further giving them a massive advantage there. So I feel like Corey himself has not played this week particularly well. And on top of that, I feel like I'm so worried about him in the short term that I feel like 7 is a pretty reasonable spot for him. Though again, we'll have to see what happens. Now we're moving on to number 6, and we have another player that's not in the best spot right now, but they are more likely to be safe over Corey, and here we have America. Now, I could argue that America has maybe played this week worse, where for the longest time she didn't seem to realize that Cameron would break her up along with Corey. And I feel like that's pretty bad on its own. But aside from that, like obviously she's in a similar spot as Corey, where the eyes are on them to be broken up. However, America herself would not be targeted in that situation. And plus, I feel like Cameron is more likely to work with her moving forward, but at the same time, losing Corey would be such a massive blow to her game that I feel like I can't really reward her too much for that. So I feel like, sort of similar to Corey, she's not in the best spot right now. But again, considering there's no game happening right now, there's time for things to shift. But I feel like 6 is a good spot to put her for right now. Now moving on to number 5, and we actually have someone that I had relatively high in last week's rankings, but I feel like sort of similar to Corey in America, they've kind of seemed to drop a bit, and I feel like they're probably in a worse spot. But here we have Mimi. And again, I feel like this week hasn't been that great for Mimi, where for one, like she actually got a lot of heat from Corey, Matt, Jag, and America for picking Bowie first in the HOH, as it made it pretty clear that she was trying to work the middle in an effort to keep Jared safe. So I feel like the fact that she got exposed for that is pretty bad. But even moving forward, she's being talked about as a potential target. She's also being talked about as being put up on the block. And again, I feel like she's someone that isn't in the best position right now, so I can't really put her too much higher because of it. And I feel like she herself has not really played actively enough to get herself out of that bad spot. But with that said, there's still time for things to turn around. But I feel like with the way the game is shaking out right now, I feel like 5 is a good spot to put her. Now we're moving on to number 4, and I feel like this may be a bit high for this person, but I feel like there hasn't really been anything major to drag them down. But here we have Bowie Jane. And again, I feel like Bowie Jane hasn't really done anything too destructive to her game, whereas I feel like the people we just talked about are more likely to be targeted within the next week compared to her. And yes, some of that could be due to her being a smaller threat, but I feel like that security at least is something at least. Now, yes, I mean, she hasn't really been playing the game, but then again, there isn't much of a game to be talking about right now. And while I can see this definitely changing in the next week, I feel like for now, I feel like 4 is a decent spot for her. So because of that, she is here number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and again, this is another person that I was definitely questioning their spot here, but I feel like with the way things have shifted in recent days, I feel like this person could be in a very solid position moving forward, but here we have Jag. Now, I still feel like Jag will be a pretty big target in the future, and I feel like that's definitely a big concern there. I feel like Corey and America would definitely have their eyes on him at some point if they were to win HOH. However, I feel like Jag and Matt are more likely to win competitions moving forward. And plus, with them like being able to build an alliance with Cam, I feel like if Cam comes back into the game, that will definitely be a boon towards Jag's game. So I feel like that's a pretty big benefit there. And now, yes, I still feel like at the end of the day, like a shot will eventually be taken at Jag and Matt, where Jag is the more likely target there. But I still feel like for a short term, Jag's less likely to be targeted than the likes of Corey or even Cam. But I feel like at this point, 3 is about as high as I can put him. Now we're moving on to number 2, and this is a pretty big jump from last week. However, I felt like this person definitely had some potential to jump up, but we actually have Siri here. Now, I will admit that Jared being back in the game for the time being is probably not ideal for Siri's game, but I feel like through this whole double eviction and with her having the ability to have some conversations, I feel like Siri has been making some inroads to a degree. And with Corey being a bigger target at this point for the likes of Jag and Matt, I feel like Siri's target has moved way down in the priority list. Now, at the end of the day, I still have a lot of concern about her actually getting towards the very end and winning at the end. But again, the fact that she was in the spot to where she could have been a replacement target had Jared won the veto on the double, to now where it seems like she'll probably be in it for a good amount of time, is a big benefit to her game. So I feel like that was a big enough excuse to have her jump all the way up here. Though at the same time, I still have that concern about her winning at the very end, especially with the likes of Jag and Matt still there to win some of these endgame physical comps. But I feel like 2 is a reasonable spot to put her at. And now, at number 1, the most likely person to win Big Brother 25 right now is Matt. And to me, it's not really close right now, where I feel like Matt is probably in the best spot in the house based on what the dynamics have shifted to where there are plenty of other bigger targets around. The people like Cameron, for instance, people like Corey in America are also big targets. And I feel like with Matt and Jag being two of the biggest competitors left in the house, I feel like that'll be a pretty big benefit to his game. And plus, after Jared is taken out on Thursday night, which seems pretty likely, I feel like with Cameron being there, that's another person that can help him win some comps, someone that'll be willing to work with him. And I feel like if Matt is able to survive long enough, there's a good chance they could just win out. So I feel like I feel even more confident about Matt's chances after this week, even though it seemed at first he would be in some hot water, where obviously Jared felt betrayed by him over not using the veto after picking him through house guest choice. Although at this point, with Jared leaving the game, it may not even matter. But even beyond that, he's been able to make decent enough inroads with Siri in that side to ensure that he still has a good relationship with them. So I feel like that's a pretty big boon to Matt's game as well. And just in general, of the 11 people here, I feel like Matt is the person I had the most confidence in to win the game for this point, and because of that, he is here number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out with the channel. Now I know that this was a shorter video than usual this week, but then again, there's just not really that much information to chew on here, really more so speculation about the near future, but hopefully next week we'll have more actual game talk to discuss here, so stay tuned for that. Survivor 45 is right about to start, so you can expect power rankings for that, and along with that amazing race, which I'll be starting coverage for next week. Obviously, I have a Patreon, so you can check me out there. Like, you can support the channel by clicking the link in the description. And if you haven't already, you can join the Discord server by clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.